Welcome to Left Africa.
I want you to picture something. There are over 7,000 foreign nationals, mostly from Malawi, just huddled together in this massive open field near the central business district in Durban.
Yeah, and the conditions are just bleak.
Completely. They have absolutely no formal shelter, food and water, severely limited, but they absolutely refuse to go back to their homes.
Right, or their workplaces.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because right now, vigilante groups, and this is straight from the field reports groups, armed with machetes and standbox, those heavy whips.
Yeah, the heavy leather whips.
Right. They're literally going door to door in these neighborhoods, demanding to see ID papers and violently evicting anyone they consider an outsider. Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to synthesize this giant stack of urgent field reports and security briefings about what is frankly a rapidly escalating crisis in South Africa. And,
the reports we're seeing from aid workers on the ground, they're describing an environment of just total paralysis. Like, these aren't just isolated, spontaneous skirmishes. We are looking at a highly coordinated campaign of intimidation.
And it's spreading, right? It's not just one area.
No, it's across both the Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal provinces, and it has effectively severed thousands of people from their livelihoods, just forcing them into this state of internal displacement.
Which really brings us to the central tension of the materials we're unpacking for you today. I mean, we're looking at South Africa, a nation that has spent the entire post-apartheid era meticulously positioning itself as this, beacon of human rights.
The moral compass of the continent, basically.
Exactly. Moral leadership on the global stage. Yet today, as we're seeking, it is the epicenter of a continental emergency.
It's a huge shift.
It is. And to understand the mechanics of how a country makes that transition, we have to trace this current wave of violence back to a very specific self-imposed deadline that just passed.
Right. So the immediate catalyst for all those people currently sleeping in that Durban field, it was this highly organized campaign, both digital and physical.
The June 30th thing.
Yeah, exactly. They were demanding that all foreign nationals leave South Africa by June 30, 2026.
Just a blanket demand.
Pretty much. For the first half of this year, this date was being heavily circulated. Organizers were using this euphemism, calling it a deadline for a voluntary departure.
Voluntary, right.
But of course, when midnight on June 30 passed, the violence transitioned instantly from, online threats to physical enforcement.
They actually made good on it.
They did. We started seeing these organized groups making good on the rhetoric, moving block by block to physically rip people from their residences.
Okay, but I understand that the June 30 deadline served as a trigger, but a social media campaign, no matter how viral, doesn't put 7,000 people in a field overnight.
No, definitely not.
The logistics of that, the capability to enforce coordinated door-to-door raids, that requires existing networks.
Deeply entrenched networks.
Right. So the state must have seen this brewing. It's like someone laying down dry brush for years. They might not have lit the match on June 30, but they absolutely built the bonfire.
That's a really good way to put it.
So were local authorities legally hamstrung from intervening early on, or was this just willful blindness? Because the sources point all the way back to the deadly riots of July 2021.
Yeah, the 2021 riots, when former President Jacob Zuma was imprisoned.
Right.
That is really the crucial inflection point for all the institutional decay we are witnessing today.
Because things just totally fell apart then.
Completely. When that unrest broke out over Zuma's imprisonment, 354 people were killed. And the logistics of the state's security apparatus fundamentally broke down.
I remember reading in the briefings that police precincts literally ran out of ammunition.
They did. And intelligence services were totally blind to how the looting was being organized. So because the state was so overwhelmed, ordinary citizens in these neighborhoods basically formed their own barricades.
Taking it into their own hands.
Right. They formed armed patrols just to protect their communities from the rioters.
So they essentially realized the government can no longer guarantee our safety.
Exactly.
And that normalized the idea of localized DIY security.
Precisely. The state's failure in 2021 completely broke the psychological contract between the government and the public.
Created a vacuum.
A massive vacuum of authority. And into that vacuum stepped these community-based vigilante movements.
Which leads us to Operation Dudula.
Yes, which translates to pushback in Zulu. By 2022, they had really formalized under the leadership of this guy, Nalala Lux Dlamini.
So Operation Dudula basically harnessed that lingering the anxiety from the 2021 riots, and they redirected it entirely toward an anti-immigrant platform.
So it became their whole focus.
Right. They weren't just protesting. They were systematically pressuring landlords to evict foreign tenants. They were calling for aggressive boycotts of foreign-owned businesses. But looking at the timeline we have here, the government never officially banned them.
No, they were never formally outlawed as an organization.
That is wild to me.
It is. I mean, individual members occasionally faced incitement charges here and there, but the movement itself was just permitted to operate, which essentially normalized this hostile extrajudicial action against immigrants.
Just baked it into the culture.
Yeah. Now, it is important to note for you all listening, the leadership of Operation Dudula has not directly claimed responsibility for ordering these specific post-June 30 raids.
Right. They maintain plausible deniability.
Exactly. But the security analysts in our briefings, they emphasize that direct commands aren't really necessary when you've already laid all the ideological groundwork.
There was one quote from the analyst that was just chilling.
Oh, about the manifesto.
Yeah. They said, Operation Dudula may not command the machetes, but it wrote the manifesto.
It's a textbook example of stochastic terrorism.
Right. Where a group just saturates the environment with so much specific, heated rhetoric that the eventual violence becomes inevitable.
Even without a direct order, the public adopts the ideology and executes it on their own.
Which shifts our focus to how the state is responding right now. Because the data we are looking at paints a very dark picture of a population realizing that they are, once again, entirely on their own.
The metrics on public anxiety are highly revealing here.
Walk us through that Google Trends data, because that really stood out to me.
Yeah, so if you look at Google Trends data for South Africa right now, as of today, July 4 searches for the word police have spiked to an index of over 2,000.
Over 2,000.
Right. That is the highest search volume for any non-sporting term in the entire year of 2026.
Wow. And that's not just, casual curiosity.
Not at all. When search volume for emergency services spikes to that degree, it indicates a populace that is frantically looking for localized law enforcement contact info.
Because the physical police presence in their actual streets is non-existent.
Exactly. They're searching online because no one is outside.
The contrast between that ground-level panic and the political response we're seeing is just jarring.
The Justice Minister's statement.
Yes, the South African Justice Minister issues this statement to address the mounting pressure, saying, quote, "We are a nation of laws, and we will not tolerate vigilantism."
Which critics are rightly calling wholly inadequate.
It's completely divorced from tactical reality.
Right, because there are no curfews being implemented. There's no massive deployment of specialized task forces to these affected areas in Gauteng or KwaZulu-Natal.
Just a press release.
Just words. And, in political science, the fundamental definition of a functioning state relies on its monopoly on the legitimate use of physical force.
The government is the only one allowed to do the policing.
Exactly. A government retains authority because it is the sole entity legally permitted to police the streets and guarantee public safety.
Right.
So when a government issues a press release denouncing vigilantism but fails to actually deploy the physical resources to stop it.
They are broadcasting that they've lost that monopoly.
Precisely. They've lost control.
It's like discovering the referee in a boxing match has quietly left the arena, right?
That's a great analogy.
But the fight is still going on. The fighters realize there are no rules anymore, and suddenly the audience in the front row is forced to hire their own private bodyguards just to safely watch the match.
Which brings us to one of the most alarming developments in the entire stack of briefings.
The private sector stepping in.
Yes. Because the state has lost control of the arena, the private sector is now stepping in to manage international diplomacy.
Which is just insane to think about. Tell them about Fidelity.
Right. So we are tracking a major escalation involving Fidelity Security Group. They are one of South Africa's largest private security conglomerates.
Huge company.
Massive. And according to the latest dispatches, Fidelity has officially activated its emergency contingency protocols.
Meaning what exactly on the ground?
Meaning they are deploying heavily armed rapid response teams to secure business and residential compounds for their private clients.
Okay, standard security stuff.
But here is the major shift. They are actively coordinating with foreign diplomatic missions to conduct safe evacuations of targeted foreign nationals.
The mechanics of that are just staggering when you really pause to think about it.
It really is.
We are talking about sovereign nations' embassies determining that the host country's actual police force is too compromised or just too incapacitated to rely on.
So they bypass the national government entirely.
And they hire a private corporation to execute diplomatic extractions.
It represents a profound shift in the architecture of public safety.
Absolutely.
I mean, South Africa already has this unique dynamic where the private security industry vastly outnumbers the official police force in terms of personnel.
Right, they have a massive private security sector.
But when foreign missions utilize those private entities for emergency evacuations during a domestic crisis,
It changes the whole game.
it does. Public safety ceases to be a guaranteed right provided by the state. It becomes a private commodity.
Available only to those embassies or individuals who can afford the corporate contingency fee.
Exactly.
And if private security is stepping in because the state has failed, that forces foreign governments into a really volatile corner.
They can't just rely on Pretoria's assurances anymore.
Right. This domestic policing failure has rapidly mutated into a massive diplomatic crisis. Neighboring nations are aggressively stepping in to protect their own citizens.
And this diplomatic fallout is being driven by the severe human toll over the past few days.
Let's get into the specifics of that. Mozambique, for example.
Yes. Mozambique has officially confirmed the deaths of 5 of its citizens in the unrest.
5 people.
Right. And they've delivered a formal diplomatic note demanding a joint investigation with South African authorities.
But the situation with Ghana, that one really reveals the deeply concerning operational failures at the local policing level.
It really does. The Ghanaian Foreign Ministry is citing the deaths of 2 of their citizens in the Western Cape.
Kwabena Boagen, right?
Yes, 35-year-old Kwabena Boagen in Nyanga. Local officials initially tried to dismiss his death as just being related to local extortion syndicates.
Like, oh, it's just regular crime.
Exactly. But Ghana is arguing that the broader climate of unchecked hostility is what provides the cover for these murders to occur in the first place.
But the second case points to something much more systematic than just a police force that's spread too thin.
You're talking about Bashiru Isak.
Yeah, the 40-year-old Ghanaian man who was shot dead in Khayelitsha.
Right. When Ghanaian officials actually inquired about his murder, South African police claimed they had no official record of the incident.
The mechanics of that missing record are what we really need to unpack here.
It's incredibly suspicious.
How does a foreign national get gunned down during a period of intense, highly publicized xenophobic violence, and the local precinct just fails to generate a basic incident report?
From a logistical standpoint, our sources suggest it points to one of 3 systemic failures.
Okay, walk us through them.
First, it could be that the local precinct is simply so overwhelmed by the sheer volume of violence that their administrative capacity has just completely collapsed.
They're too busy to do the paperwork.
Right. Second, there is the possibility of deliberate statistical suppression.
Meaning they hide the numbers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Local commanders might intentionally avoid recording xenophobic murders just to keep their precinct's violent crime metrics artificially low during a PR crisis.
Wow. And the third?
The third, and honestly the most damaging to diplomatic relations, is the potential for ideological alignment.
Where the police actually agree with the vigilantes.
Yes, where local officers sympathize with the mobs and deliberately refuse to process the paperwork in order to protect the perpetrators.
Man. But, regardless of whether it's just administrative collapse or a deliberate cover-up, the message sent to the Ghanaian government is exactly the same.
That their citizen's life didn't even warrant a piece of paper.
Exactly. Which naturally invited a severe diplomatic protest. But while Ghana and Mozambique are demanding investigations and paperwork, Nigeria is taking an entirely different, much heavier approach.
Nigeria is actively mobilizing its resources. The government in Abuja has already begun repatriating hundreds of its citizens from South Africa.
Just getting them out of there.
Right. But their diplomatic leverage extends much further than just evacuations. They're officially demanding financial compensation from the South African government.
For the loss of life and property damage, right?
Yes, for the destruction of Nigerian-owned businesses and property.
And the mechanism they are using to enforce that demand is basically a threat. The threat of reciprocal measures.
Exactly. When a nation like Nigeria threatens reciprocal measures against South Africa, they are actively targeting the massive economic overlap between the two countries.
Because South African businesses are huge in Nigeria.
Massive footprints. We're talking telecommunications giants, major banking institutions, satellite television providers.
So Nigeria is essentially implying, look, if you can't guarantee the physical and economic safety of Nigerians in Johannesburg,
we won't guarantee the operational safety of South African corporate assets in Lagos.
That is a hardline stance.
Very hard line.
It weaponizes economics, threatening to destabilize trade relations between two of the largest economies on the entire continent.
It really exposes the paradox here.
Right. This explosion of diplomatic fury exposes this incredible paradox at the heart of our deep dive today. There is this massive structural credibility gap between the brand South Africa projects internationally and the reality of how it governs domestically.
And that gap is heavily tied to the concept of Ubuntu.
Explain Ubuntu for those who might not be familiar with how it's used politically.
Sure. It translates roughly to humanity toward others, or I am because we are.
It's a beautiful philosophy.
It is. And the Ramaphosa administration, following in the footsteps of previous post-apartheid governments, has utilized Ubuntu as the core foundational philosophy of its foreign policy.
It's a highly effective, deeply moral framing. It's given South Africa immense soft power globally.
And we just saw the peak of that soft power 2 years ago, in 2024.
Oh, the ICJ case.
Right, when South Africa brought a case against Israel at the International Court of Justice regarding the war in Gaza.
They successfully positioned themselves as the moral conscience of the global South.
They utilized international law to demand the protection of human rights in a conflict zone thousands of miles away.
And they earned widespread international praise for that geopolitical maneuver.
They did, but now that juxtaposition is impossible for other African nations to ignore.
Because the factory floor at home is on fire.
Exactly. Diplomats from Ghana, Malawi, and Nigeria are now openly describing the Ubuntu brand as entirely hollow.
I mean, they're questioning the legitimacy of a government that has the institutional capacity to litigate human rights abuses on the highest legal stage in The Hague.
But apparently lacks the capacity to stop armed mobs from hunting African immigrants in its own suburban neighborhoods.
The hypocrisy is just generating a massive diplomatic rift, which begs a glaring question regarding continental governance if you really zoom out.
The AU.
Yes. If we have major powers like Nigeria, Ghana, and Mozambique locked in an escalating diplomatic conflict with South Africa over mass displacement and targeted violence, where is the African Union?
It's a great question.
The AU is theoretically designed to mediate exactly this type of continental fracture.
Well, the African Union's silence is frankly one of the most troubling data points in the entire July 4 dossier.
Still nothing from them.
As of this moment, there has been no official statement, no condemnation of the violence, no deployment of diplomatic envoys to mediate the crisis.
Total silence.
Total silence.
Yeah.
And to understand why an institution designed for crisis management is so paralyzed, we have to look at the geopolitical mechanics of the AU itself.
It always comes down to funding and leverage, doesn't it?
Usually, yes.
South Africa isn't just a member state. They are a foundational pillar of the organization.
Precisely. South Africa is one of the big 5 financial contributors to the African Union budget.
Alongside who else?
Nigeria, Egypt, Algeria. And historically, South Africa has been a primary driver of the AU's political agenda.
So the internal politics of the AU often require consensus, and there's this deep-seated institutional hesitation to openly condemn a primary benefactor.
You don't bite the hand that feeds you. The diplomatic calculus for a lot of these member states is that alienating Pretoria could stall much broader continental trade and security agreements.
It is the geopolitical equivalent of a corporate board refusing to investigate the CEO because he brings in the most revenue.
That's exactly what it is.
The institution prioritizes its own political stability over the mandate it was literally created to uphold.
But while the AU weighs its political capital, the human geography at risk is just expanding exponentially.
Give us the numbers on that, because we started by looking at 7,000 people in a field in Durban, but the demographic scope of this is staggering.
It is. If we zoom out and look at the broader immigration demographics within South Africa, the scale of potential displacement is terrifying. Current estimates place the number of Zimbabweans living in South Africa at roughly 1.8 million.
1.8 million.
Right. Then there are an estimated 1 million Mozambicans, 500,000 Malawians, and 200,000 Nigerians.
We are talking about millions of people whose families, businesses, and legal residences are entirely dependent on a state security apparatus that is actively failing as we speak.
If these vigilante networks continue to operate unchecked and the state continues to rely on press releases instead of actual police deployment,
we are looking at the mechanics of a historical mass exodus.
Undoubtedly.
So let's synthesize the trajectory of the sources we've examined today for you all listening. We started by looking at a specific digital deadline, June 30, that manifested into physical, door-to-door violence.
Driven by vigilante networks like Operation Dudula.
Right, networks that stepped into the vacuum left by the state's massive logistical failure during the 2021 riots.
And we observed how that loss of the state's monopoly on violence forced citizens to frantically search for police who just aren't responding.
Which ultimately pushed foreign embassies to bypass the state entirely and hire private security firms like Fidelity to execute emergency evacuations.
Then we traced how local policing failures, like that missing murder record in Khayelitsha, ignited a diplomatic firestorm,
resulting in Nigerian threats of economic retaliation, and really the exposure of South Africa's Ubuntu foreign policy as a completely hollow brand right now.
And finally, we examine how the African Union's political paralysis has left millions of foreign nationals without any institutional advocate.
The underlying current connecting all these reports is the rapid erosion of institutional authority, from the local police precinct all the way up to the Continental Union. Taking the time to really understand the why and the how behind these events is so crucial.
It really is.
It's easy to just look at a headline about unrest and assume it's just spontaneous chaos. But by analyzing the systemic failures, the logistics, the economics, the diplomacy, we get a much clearer picture of how fragile our global systems actually are.
And as we conclude this analysis, there is a broader implication embedded in the sources that warrants deep consideration.
What's that?
We are actively watching a private, profit-driven security corporation successfully execute diplomatic extractions because a sovereign democratic state has failed to maintain order.
It signals a fundamental shift in how global security is managed.
It does. It raises a critical question about the future of global statecraft. If a national government cannot secure its own territory, and a continental body like the African Union is totally paralyzed by internal politics, we may be witnessing the early stages of the privatization of national defense.
Wow.
What happens to the geopolitical landscape when foreign governments realize they no longer need to negotiate with a host nation's diplomats to protect their citizens?
Because they can simply hire a corporate conglomerate to deploy armed forces on their behalf.
Exactly.
We might not just be looking at a regional crisis here. We might be watching the blueprint for how corporate mercenaries slowly replace the fundamental duties of the state in the 21st century.
It's a sobering thought.
It is a profoundly sobering thought to carry with you the next time you picture those 7,000 people sitting in the dark in a field in Durban. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.